All right, welcome everyone. We're about to start our virtual field trip today to Mexico. We do use Kahoot here on the Geo Show on our virtual field trips. You can go to kahoot.it, enter in today's game pin 8101883, or open up the Kahoot app. The first couple of questions are not worth points, so don't worry. You'll have opportunities to get logged in, and you must watch on Zoom to be real time. If you're watching on Facebook or one of these other places, there is a delay, so it's probably not going to work as great for you. All right, let's get started. Let's go exploring. All right. Welcome back, all explorers. We are now going live on Learn Around the World's Geo Show. Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Hall. You can call me Brandon or even GOB because my show is called The Geo Show. All right. So our show is called the Geo Show. So my job is I travel all around the world. I go to unique places. I learn about new cultures, new peoples, new histories, and I come back and I share those experiences with explorers just like yourselves. So what I want to always encourage people to do is I can't tell you anything and everything and all there is to know about a culture. It's so diverse. There's so much related to it. What I do hope today is that you see something that makes you go, huh, hmm, why is that? And you take this to go out there and learn more on your own. So if you're a younger audience member today, get your parents, get your teachers, get those people to teach you what a primary source is. Go find those good sources and keep your learning going. So let's go out there and keep exploring with our virtual field trip. So today's virtual field trip is titled Mexican Culture. And today's show is brought to you by Learn Around the World. So you can interact with today's show using Kahoot. So make sure you get logged in at kahoot.it. We will also be fielding questions right in your Zoom window, or if you're watching from outside of Zoom today, you can send your questions over to hashtag GeoShow. That's hashtag GeoShow. So let's go ahead and get started with our first Kahoot question today. All right, make sure you get logged in if you want to play along with us today over on Kahoot. The first few questions are just some fun practice ones, so we'll go ahead and get started. And today's game pin is 927-2979. Again, 927-2979. Let's go ahead and get started. So I give you just a small amount of time to answer, so make sure you get those questions in quickly. All right, we're going to go ahead and launch it. Don't worry if you missed this first question, it is not worth points. We'll give point outs later, however. All right, fact or fiction? Baseball is the most popular sport in Mexico. What do you think? Fact or fiction? All right, as you can see, we go pretty fast here. That is fiction. The most popular sport in Mexico is football. And no, all you New England Patriots, Carolina Panthers, Steelers fans out there, when you travel outside of the United States, football is soccer. So we're talking about football or soccer to many of you. So you need to know when you go outside of the borders of the United States, it's called American football, which many of you may have been thinking of just then. All right, so let's go ahead and start it out today. And we are going to talk about Mexico. So we always start off talking about locations. Location matters, explorers. So everything we see today, if it's food or religion or anything that we talk about, always be asking yourself some questions. How is this place the same from my home? And how might this place be a little bit different from my home? And then never stop there, explorers. Always go further. What might be some reasons for those similarities or differences? All right. So, is it the weather? Is it the politics of a place? Is it the resources available? All these things play a part into what makes a place a place. All right. So, when we talk about what place we're visiting today, we are going to Mexico, our closest neighbor to the south, if you are watching from the United States. And as you can see, Mexico is a big country, explorers. So there's no way in the world we can talk about all of Mexico in one short show. Think about it. If you are from Florida in the United States, your local culture may be quite different than someone from California. You may have some different regional foods that is served on your table during popular holidays, for example. All right, same thing happens in Mexico. Mexico has 31 different states. So they are the technically the United States of Mexico. So they have states just like you have in the United States, if that is where you're watching from. So keep that in mind. We're going to focus today on central Mexico. Primarily, we're going to talk about Mexico City. So Mexico City is a very large city, and we're also going to talk about Oaxaca today. So Oaxaca and Mexico City are our two places that we're going to focus on. So Oaxaca is in more southern Mexico, and Mexico City is right in the center. So Mexico City is a big, big place. And one of the places that we're going to look at is right in the center of Mexico City. This is the cathedral. So we're going to look at the Metropolitan Cathedral. And right behind that is some pretty cool history to Mexico City and Mexico as a whole. So this is our location that we're investigating today, and this is where we're traveling to on our virtual field trip. If you like traditional maps, here's where we're going: Mexico City and Oaxaca today. So we're going to reference both of these places in our exploration. Just keep in mind, Mexico is a big, big place. So there may be some differences from different regions. So I encourage you to go out there and research some of those other places. A vocabulary word that we're going to use a lot today is Mesoamerica. Can everyone say Mesoamerica? Awesome. So Mesoamerica refers or is a reference to central Mexico all the way down into Central America. So other countries like Guatemala, Honduras. And this is what we call this region before 1521. So before Europeans, specifically before the Spanish came to modern day Mexico, because Mexico is a modern day country and there were people and other cultures here before. And today, when we study these people and these cultures, we call them Mesoamericans. These were Mesoamericans that lived in Mesoamerica. That's how we can talk about these peoples. So these were native peoples. People like the Aztec in Mexico City today, or Tenochtitlan was the name of their city. The Zapotec, which was around in Oaxaca. You may have heard of the Maya before. And look at that. They go across these borders. So when you think about, look at a modern day map, all these man-made borders are these things that weren't here at some point, right? So these are just here in modern times. Borders can shift depending on what what time in history that we're talking about. That's why we have some overlapping things here. But also I like to talk about culture. When we talk about cultures, you need to think about people. Think about where you come from. Think about your family and everyone who influences you that makes you so awesome, right? Same thing with cultures. We have different groups of people that blend together and make this beautiful modern culture that we have today. So specifically in central Mexico, we have the culture that was already here. So the Mesoamericans, these are the native people, specifically Aztec people in central Mexico. Then you had the Spanish come in. And then because of trade, you had a lot of Middle Eastern influence into Mexico City specifically, because things and goods would be brought to the western shore of Mexico, taken across land, put back on a boat, and go over to Spain. And because of that, there's a lot of food and architectural, that's buildings, influence right in Mexico City from the Middle East. So all these places kind of mixed together, all these different groups of people mixed together to make modern day Central Mexico what modern day Central Mexico is. So here's what we're going to do today on our virtual field trip. We're going to talk about some fun, different topics like art, sports, food, religion, and then we'll do a little bit more of a deeper historical tour at the end. So all of our younger audience, if you want to, you can make your way through the fun stuff in the beginning, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the history of specifically Mexico history towards the end. So if you don't want to wait that long, that is okay as well. So we're going to get things started here today, and today is a choose your own adventure. That means you're going to decide what we talk about when we talk about it, and we're going to do that over on Kahoot. If you're not logged in yet, Go ahead and get logged in with your game pin today, 8101-883. All right, we're going to go ahead and launch that next question. I want to know from you, what do you want to talk about first, explorers? Do you want to talk about art, music? Oh, sorry. We're going to talk about art, food, religion, or what would you like to talk about first? So it looks like we have a tie. This means we get to go to presenter's choice. You know what? I love food. So we're going to start off with food today, explorers. And you can't start talking about food in Mexico unless you start off talking about corn. And this is my opinion, by the way. So let's start off talking about corn, because corn is one of those foods that is such an important crop to not only us today, but to the people of Mesoamerica. In fact, Mesoamericans, often people ask me, what do we have today? Is it the wheel? Is it like, what did they invent? What are these? A lot of people ask these questions, great questions too. And so I always come back to agriculture. If you like to eat like I like to eat, I guarantee you have to say a big old thank you to Mesoamericans. They first domesticated. So domesticate is a word, it's a big word we use. Basically, it means we take something that's wild, like a plant or an animal, and over time, we make it to something that we can grow in a garden, like a plant, like corn, or it's an animal, like a chicken or a cow. Over time, these animals have become what we call domesticated. Right? That means they work and live amongst people. All right. So corn was first domesticated around in Mesoamerica. We don't know exactly if it was the Zapotec or the Maya or which group of people that it was, but basically it started off as a grass, and over time they were able to develop what's closer to a modern day corn. And it's so important that corn has spread all over out of Mesoamerica. It spread over to what is across what is today the United States and Canada. To native peoples were using corn all across North America and even down into South America. And of course, today corn is all over the world. And who do we have to thank for that? We have the Mesoamericans to thank for that. So some of the cool things they do with corn, there's all kinds of different varieties of corn found in Mexico. Typically today you find around 2 or 3 varieties of sweet corn in your grocery stores, but in Mexico, there's lots of different types of corns. There's about 60 different types of corn, native corns that are found in Mexico today. And one of my favorite is when they take corn and they make hominy. So hominy is something when they soak the corn kernels in alkaline, and this helps give it more nutrients, and then they can put it in other foods as well. And other foods that were domesticated by Mesoamericans. Do you like avocados? Do you like spicy food? And how they grew a lot of this food is really cool as well. So when we talk about the Aztec, the people that were in Mexico City, they grew their food around their city called Tenochtitlan, which was in the middle of a lake. It was an island, and they had floating gardens. What? That's right. In fact, when the Spanish here, they called this New Venice because there were just canals as far as you could see around their city. And these are called chinapas. Okay, so chinapas are these floating gardens, and these are canals or waterways. So they would build up these floating gardens. And what's significant or what's neat about this is because it's in water, then you can grow, and they got 2 to 3 harvests a year. So a harvest is when we collect the corn after growing. Typically around many of your homes, you'll get one harvest every single year. They could get 2 to 3 different harvests during a single year. That's how neat these chinapas and how important they were to their people. And so this is a drawing or painting of Tenochtitlan. So you could see this was the island of Tenochtitlan, and it was completely surrounded by a lake. This is important when we look at modern day Mexico City. All of this lake is no longer there. It's all buildings and homes. And so this is a painting of what we think it looks like, because we don't really have any photographs or anything like that. What? How do they live without Instagram and all these other phones to take pictures? Well, they had to you had to paint things, right, or do things out of memory. So this is what in one artist's interpretation of what we think it might have looked like. We don't really know for sure. All right, so going back to these chanapas, what's neat when we start going around Mexico, I think it's always interesting to look how some local foods blend in with some modern, especially I'm coming into this travel experience as a foreigner from the United States. So French fries are a big thing. I thought it was neat to find street tacos with French fries topping on them. That was pretty cool. So some other traditional meals like pozole, if you've never had it, an amazing stew that today is primarily pork or chicken in with the hominy. Remember that hominy corn kernels? That's what you see up here, these big kernels of corn. This is my favorite food that I came across Central America. And I got a great opportunity to visit a class room, and they made me some delicious home cooked meals in Mexico cities like tamales, tacos, and even mole. So mole, and this is black mole, by the way, so it's chocolate in there. Do you like chocolate? You have chocolate to thank Mesoamerica for as well. They ate it a lot differently than we do today. The Maya, for example, would drink it kind of like a hot chocolate, but not sweet, is more bitter. And but anyways, so mole has lots of different kinds of peppers in it, a really popular type of food. And this is a really interesting type of street food that you can find around central Mexico. It's really popular in Mexico City. And the reason it's popular in Mexico City is because we have a blending of different cultures. So these are al pastor tacos. So al pastor is referencing sheep. And so this type of food, if you watch it, we're going to look at this meat marinating. It's marinating on a vertical spit. So this is typical if you've ever been to a place like New York City or anything like that. This is the type of cooking that comes out of the Middle East, right? And typically it's done with lamb. But here in Mexico, the people preferred pork instead of lamb. So what they did is they took this marinating and cooking technique from the Middle East and they altered it to fit what they wanted. And what they wanted was a marinated pork cooked in that style, and they put toppings on it like pineapple, which sounds really weird, right? Marinated pork maybe topped with pineapple. I love al pastor tacos. These are so delicious. Some people are interested and they ask me, what can you find from maybe our home? Remember comparisons? Well, some things you can find today are some things like Domino's, Krispy Kreme, Chili's. These are some of the places I found. Church's Chicken, around McDonald's, Mexico City. And what is that? Explorers, is it $30? $30 for a hamburger? What do you think? You can answer in the chat. All right, so let's think about it. Is it $30 for a hamburger, or do you think they use a different type of money? All right. So if you want, you can always send in and speak to me through. All right. So someone out there, Michael saying pesos. All right. So high five, Michael. Great job. So pesos is the money that they use. Most countries, not all, most countries print and use their own money and they have their own money system. In Mexico, they have the Mexican peso. Now it changes. One is not always equal to one when you talk about different kinds of money. So, and from different places. And it's changes, and I should have checked before we went live, but I didn't. But over the past year, it's averaged around 20 pesos equaled $1 US. 20 pesos equaled $1 US. So if you take that rough estimate there and we look at 30 pesos, okay, this is $1.50. That's a little more reasonable for a hamburger from McDonald's, right? So so those are things to think about. Michael's really Eva. All right, sorry about that, Eva. Great job, Eva, with your knowledge about pesos. All right, so other places and things that are interesting about food, also Fruit Loops, Oreos. These are things that is you can find in Mexico, of course. And then, of course, there's on regional things as well. People typically like to look at the candy aisle, and again, it's not $13.50 for M&Ms. These are prices in pesos. All right. So again, this is what their money looks like. Now I didn't check it today, so I don't know if it's 19.15 pesos equals $1 today. But these are the coins when you look at their peso. So this is the 10, 5, 2, and 1 peso. And these are the notes or bills. And how cool is that? I really love Mexican money because when you look at it, look how pretty it is. And what's also neat is when you go through your wallet and you're looking for money really quickly, it's really easy to say, oh, I know what the green one is worth or the pink one or so forth. And then look at them. They have monarch butterflies on their money. And the other thing that I really love about Mexican money, and some other countries do this as well, but I really like this, is that they put, of course, they put important political figures from their past on their money, but they also put important people from everywhere. So I think this is important, and maybe something we can take from Mexico, maybe in the future with our money. I'm from the United States, and maybe we can get a more rounded version of a culture on our money. And when you look at culture, you talk about people, especially like artists, people like Diego Rivera, Frida Kahlo, are on their money. How cool is that? Because they have placed a significance on what art means to their culture and their country and how big a deal these people are to them. All right, so this is just a brief introduction into food. I highly recommend we get out there and support, especially today's times, everyone out there, try to support takeout if you can in your local restaurants. And don't forget about immigrants in our country and Mexican places. Support your favorite local Mexican place if you are in the US or anywhere that you're at, really. All right, so let's move on, and we're going to talk about a different topic. And of course, we want to answer your questions live here on the show, so make sure you get those in either to hashtag GeoShow over on Twitter if you're watching from outside of our Zoom webinar, or if you're watching from inside, make sure you use that Q&A app. And someone wants to know that Kahoot code, so we'll throw it back up there for you. All right, so we're going to continue on until we get some questions to answer as we go along. And before we keep going, we need to know where we're going next. And I want to know that from you next here on the Geo Show. And we're going to use Kahoot to do that. But first, we have another fact or fiction. Make sure you get logged in over at kahoot.it 810-1883. Our next question is coming at you in 3, 2, 1. Cinco de Mayo is Mexico's Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo is Mexico's Independence Day. Fact or fiction? All right. That is a big old fiction. If you take anything out of our virtual field trip today, let's take this. Cinco de Mayo is not Mexico's Independence Day. Actually, I don't know why Cinco de Mayo is so popular in the United States. Cinco de Mayo is a celebration typically that happens in one region of Mexico. It is in honor of a battle that happened in Mexico, but it's not the Independence Day of Mexico. So if you're from the United States, that would be like if you celebrated Gettysburg or something like that. And it wasn't Civil War, by the way, in Mexico, but a battle. But it's not the Independence Day. So Independence Day happens in September for Mexico. So try to keep that. If we're going to celebrate it, if it's going to be popular in the US, let's celebrate it for what it is and not for what it is not. All right, so someone saying my overlay has the wrong number on it, so I apologize for that. So make sure you look at the bottom here. So the actual game pin is 927-2979. 927-2979. And I'll see if I can get that corrected as we go. But first, where are we going next? That's up to you, explorers. Choose your own adventure if you're logged in. All right, so we are going to talk about sports next. And now we should have everything corrected. So hopefully that's the right game pin, 927-2979, 927-2979. Make sure you're logged in. If you're not, that's why we do these practice questions explorers, so we can get it all fixed and worked out for you. All right, so we're going to talk about sports. One of my favorite things to talk about, obviously, is sports. And let's go ahead and introduce. We talked about earlier that the most popular sport in Mexico is football. Did you know that the actual sport of Mexico is the rodeo? How fun is that? But it's not like the American style or United States style of bull riding centric rodeo. It's more of a throwback to what the rodeo used to be more about, which was a lot more rope work, things like this, different aspects of the rodeo. Today in the United States, it seems to be really focused on the bull riding. All right, so let's talk about some different sports experiences today, and let's talk about football. And we are going to visit a game of one of the local teams in Mexico City. And this game, or this team, is the Pumas. So we're going to go to a Pumas game. And when you go to a Pumas game, of course, you can buy souvenirs and concessions in the stands, just like any place that you go to of your favorite sporting events back home. And hopefully we'll be able to go back to those sooner than later. And let's go ahead and see what the Pumas game is like in Mexico City. So one thing you'll notice when you go to games in Mexico is they're typically sponsored by a company. In this case, it's Telco. So you won't see, like in the US, it's more popular to see like the LA Lakers or the New York Giants or something like that. Well, in Mexico, it's typically sponsored by a company. And in this case, it's Telco. And Telco is a cell phone company. So it's kind of like if this were the Verizon Pumas, right? Or you went to the AT&T AT&T Seahawks in Washington, wherever that may be. And so when we look at that, that's one thing. The other neat thing about coming to a game here is a lot of their fans bring their own. They have their own. They have their own band section. So they'll bring instruments to the game. They'll sit together. They have choreographed chants and music that they play. And let's see what we saw some of them at the Pumas game. All right, so again, you could buy concessions. You'll see people walking up selling popcorn. I saw them selling personal pizzas at these. So it's not, again, $35, it's in pesos. And another interesting thing about the Pumas game specifically is when we talk about people loving their football. And you may have seen this around the world in places like Europe or places in Mexico. Sometimes people can have too much fun sometimes when they get in big crowds. And so that's what a lot of these police are here for, is just to make sure everyone has a safe time at the Pumas games. And you can see that outside of the stadium when you leave here as well. Now, one of the more interesting, in my personal opinion, sports to experience is lucha libre. So lucha libre is a type of wrestling. So if we have any WWE fans out there, this is kind of similar but different. Remember, I said ask yourself questions. How might something be the same to my home? How much something may be different? And so lucha libre is the traditional wrestling in Mexico, and or entertainment wrestling. And let's experience it. So the most famous, you may have seen him before, El Santo. So he went in from wrestling and became a big movie star in old movies. And his birthday is on September 23rd. You'll often see him as the Google Doodle. And if you ever see the mask like this, it's usually reference to El Santo, which is the saint. And you usually wear a mask in lucha libre wrestling, and if it's ever taken off, if your identity is ever made public, then you're not allowed to put it back on. So these masks are a big deal. So typically your favorite wrestler, you will buy a mask of your favorite wrestler. So let's see what it's like to go to a lucha libre fight or match in Mexico City. So one thing they do is they have big grand entrances, just like in WWE. And what they do, unlike WWE, if you watch our match going on, instead of having like a tag team where you see the wrestlers on the outside of the ring where you have to tag to get in, which is what many of you may be used to, instead, the 3-on-3 match is really popular, but everyone fights at the same time. So this is going to be a big difference that we're looking at when you watch the match. So make sure you're watching that. Another thing you'll notice is it's very acrobatic, as you just saw the triple suplex. Now, everyone watch this guy in the white shirt. Remember, he's not wearing a mask. So that means at some point his mask was taken off during a match and he can no longer wear it. But he's extremely good and talented. So everyone watch him. Keep your eye on the guy in the white shirt and watch him. They're entertained. So one of the things that's really interesting with the culture of lucha libre, as you see, it's kind of hard to see, but you can actually see this money. So this is a coin right here. We just saw it flying in. So what's happening is what they're picking up is people are picking up money off of the mat. So traditionally, these fighters were not paid very much. Today, they're paid a little bit more because of TV and things like this. It's become more popular. But when you go back to like El Santo's day, not everyone was as famous as El Santo and was able to make a living. So what would happen, and it still happens today, but on a more rare basis, is if you entertain the crowd, it's kind of like a tip. So it's like when you go to a restaurant and a server gives you good service, you give them a better tip than if maybe the service isn't as great. So the same idea here. If you really entertain, you're like, whoa, that was the best Lucha Libre match I've ever seen. Then you're going to tip them. You're going to throw them some more money than maybe you would have of, I've seen better. All right. And so that's what's happening here. So it's really interesting because I was told by the person I went to this match with, this local Mexico City resident, they told me this is the first time he had ever seen this. So it really doesn't happen as common anymore. So we were really lucky to get this when we were here visiting Mexico City. And when you go outside of the stadium, just like any sports that you would go to in your hometown, you're going to buy that. Remember, American football, you may buy with your favorite team's logo on it or anything like that. Well, you're going to go outside and you're going to ask your mom and dad or grandpa, grandma, uncle, aunt, whoever you're with. You're probably going to ask them to buy you a mask, a Lucha Libre mask of your favorite wrestler. And so it's really interesting of the concessions and how that works at Lucha Libre as well. And you'll see often capes as well. You can see how crowded it is. So lots of people come to see these events in Mexico City, these Lucha Libre events. All right. So again, if you have any questions, make sure you get those added in to our chat or the Q&A app so we can answer those for you. And we will continue on until we see some questions. And if you are watching from the outside, make sure you're using hashtag GeoShow if you want your questions answered live right here on the show. All right, so I want to know, explorers, where you want to go next. But first, I have another fact or fiction question, make sure you grab your Kahoots. Again, that correct game pin now is 9272979. All right. Fact or fiction, explorers? Most people in Mexico are Catholic. All right, that is fact. So most people, about 83% of people in Mexico, their religion is the Catholic version of Christianity. And remember I said places are different, right? Or maybe they're similar. But the thing we need to think about, especially when you think about religions, things like Christianity, for example, a lot of people are familiar with that religion in the United States, if that's where you're watching from. But one of the things I'm fascinated about when you travel around the world and you look at especially a big religion that's practiced in many different places is the differences in these different places. So what happens a lot is a lot of times local culture usually influences that religion and how it's practiced, specifically and for better or worse. And sometimes it's used to bring people into that religion. All right, so it used to be even higher. It used to be up around 90%. All right, so what is our next topic, explorers? Choose your own adventure. Remember, we already did sports and we already did food. So art or religion? What do you want to talk about next? All right, art by a mile. Great. So this is a fantastic topic to talk about when we talk about art. And for art today, we're going to visit the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico City, the Museum of Modern Art. So the first thing you'll notice is how big and open this space is. It used to be a municipality building, meaning there used to be like fire station and other government offices here, but it's been turned into a museum. And when we were here, all of these things you see hanging, these are kites, traditional kites. So they had a contest. So that's what these are when we look at these kites. And they had some other interesting pieces of art here. But this is one of my favorite museums I've ever been to, explorers. And the reason is I really like how the entire thing was laid out. Let me explain what I mean by that. So let's look at this map of Mexico. And this map of Mexico, what you can see is lots of different colors. So if we look at this map and go from northern Mexico all the way down to southern Mexico, let's look at some differences. So this map is depicting or showing the different natural colors that are found throughout Mexico. So let's think about that. Natural colors. Well, this is going to depend on the type of environment that you have in these regions. So if you think about northern Mexico, you're thinking about places very similar to maybe Arizona or Texas, places that are very hot, very dry, right? So we see that reflected with a lot of brown, a lot of yellow in those natural colors. As we go down through Central America, we start to get more of these colors. And then when we start to get into southern Mexico, we see some of these more rainforest colors. So we're getting down into a tropical part of the world where we get lots of vibrant colors that are found in the rainforest. And because of that, this has influenced the art, the traditional art in Mexico. So look at these desert type colors versus southern Mexico, where you find your most colorful art. So the entire museum is laid out this way. So here's an example of a traditional basket from northern Mexico. Remember, you see those dark dyes in that color. As we go down through central Mexico, you see more colors. And then when you get to southern Mexico, we see very vibrant colors popping, right? These are these colors that we're going to get out of the rainforest. So a lot more colors are available traditionally to the people in southern Mexico than to the people in northern Mexico. Not only colors, but they use animals to influence their art. So look how these masks, these are all traditional masks found throughout Mexico. And the entire museum is laid out this way. So everything at the top is from northern Mexico, and everything at the bottom is from southern Mexico. Remember, more colors. You see more colors in those traditional masks versus northern Mexico, where you're going to see more animal hide, more desert tones in their coloration. Animals play a big influence to both traditional and modern art. So traditionally, you'll see a big influence, and then modern. So these are really super cool. So these are called alihibres. Can everyone say alihibre? Awesome. Alihibre. So alihibres were started in the 1930s by a Mexican cartoonist. And he started making these, what he called fantastic creatures, creatures he saw in his dreams. So what we're doing or what the Museum of Modern Art has done here in Mexico City is this whole display is supposed to be his dream. So this is his dream world. And we're looking at all of these original alihibres. So these are all from the original artists that we're looking at now. But this type of art is so popular, you find it all over Mexico City today. You can't walk around and not see alihibres. Really cool artwork. And in fact, it's become so popular that they even have alihibre parades, which is put on by the Museum of Modern Art. So here are some of those floats from the Alihibre parade that happened recently before we arrived here. You can see one way to make alihibres, and I encourage all of you, if we're at home today, to design your own alihibre. So if you look at some of these alihibres, one thing they're doing is they're taking animals. So pick maybe a favorite animal. Maybe it's a horse. You can change that horse into a unicorn. Maybe put some talons and wings on that horse, as you see what's happened into this alihibre. So if you want to make your own alihibre, a good place to start is take some different body parts, maybe some really out there, far out body parts from different animals, and mash them up. Make a mash up animal, and out comes your alihibre. Don't forget to make them extremely colorful. They're really, really brightly colored in this type of artwork. So what's really cool is these alihibres, some of them have lights on them, and they had some video showing these parades. So here's the parade. You can see some of them actually light up. How cool is that during the alihibre parade? This is a really cool type of artwork from central Mexico, and this is called Hachul beadwork. And this is because it comes from the state of Hachul, that region. And this is where you take like a mask or anything, and you take these little bitty plastic beads. Today they're plastic, but traditionally there would be other materials. And you take these individual beads and you put them all over something to make your design. So this mask is really covered with individual beads. So it's a type of bead art. So this is up really close of a Volkswagen Beetle. So this entire car was designed with Hachul beadwork. Now, remember earlier we talked about Christianity, specifically the Catholic religion, being the most dominant religion. And religion typically always has art that's mixed into it. So religion is a great, I always tell people, no matter what you choose to believe or not believe, that's up to you. It's your choice. But what I always encourage people is no matter what the religion is, always learn from it, because religion is such a look into a culture, because typically that religion is influenced by art, it's influenced by music, it's influenced by food, congregations, celebrations. All these things that we think of as a culture is very closely related to typically what happens at religious events and so forth. So this is called a Judas puppet. And if you know the story of Christianity, so Judas was one of the disciples that turned in Jesus in the story of Jesus in the Christian religion. And because of that, every year, right before Easter, when that all happened, Judas is made into puppets in Mexico, and he's taken out into streets, and they hook them up to these homemade fireworks. Look at these firecrackers. And basically it's an effigy. So they burn them. So they burn Judas. They explode him up pow, 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 with fireworks in the streets. And it's a big fun event that everyone comes to, but it's an event that has these religious underlying historical or undertones to it. So this is what we're looking at, these Judas puppets, which were really popular that I observed in Mexico and in Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera's house, the people I showed you on the money. And because of that, it's also influenced things like the Mother Mary. And so this is in the Catholic version of the religion, especially in Mexico, extreme importance is placed on Jesus's mother, Mary. And so when you walk throughout this museum, you see these different versions of alihibres and the different layouts. And I love these alihibres, some of my favorite artwork from anywhere. This is really cool that today is not a religious type of artwork, but it started off as it. These are called trees of life. So this started again with the Christian religion, the story of Adam and Eve. So this is the tree of life. And the original artist that made these depicted the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, if you know this story. But today they make them for all kinds of things. You'll find them with mermaids and all kinds of different creatures and characters in these trees of life, as we see up close, that are nuts. And then you can't really talk about Mexico, in my opinion, without talking about Dia de los Muertos. So Dia de los Muertos is a traditional Day of the Dead. You may have heard of it, but it's a traditional celebration or holiday that today has been moved. And again, we're seeing some effects of religion and modern day culture. This was a celebration of the Aztec. So the native people, remember, we're talking about a blending of different cultures. And so what happened was the Catholic Church moved Dia de los Muertos to the same time period as All Saints Day, which happens at the 1st of November. So if you've ever been confused and you're like, on October 31st, there's Halloween, and the next day on November 1st, I see all these skeletons everywhere. Is this kind of like Halloween? No, the holiday has nothing to do with Halloween. And really, it's a celebration of life. Any fans of Coco out there? So when you watch Coco, it gives a lot of the information or gives you a little insight to what's happening during Dia de los Muertos when people are really celebrating the lives of their family members that have passed away. They don't want to forget about them, and often in the artwork is where we see that reflected. You see someone in how we remember them in their life, like, was this player an athlete? What was his favorite sport or her favorite sports? And were they an entertainer? Were they children that like to go blah, 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 right? Or were they a musician? Were they lovers? So these are things that we can get, information that we can get when we look at the artwork from a holiday, especially like Dia de los Muertos. Other influences on art, we have pottery from Europe that influenced, and also remember we have the Middle East, we have Islamic tile work that has been used throughout the city. And so no greater example in Mexico City. This is one of my favorite buildings. And look at this beautiful, beautiful tile work. And this has that influence from the Middle East. Really, really cool stuff. And now we're going to talk about something in a little bit further south. Remember that place, Oaxaca? So Oaxaca was a different group of native people, and those were the Zapotec. Or sorry, they are the Zapotec. And the Zapotec, we have lots of traditional textile work that we still can find today in Mexico. And so this is some rug work. But if we look at some old buildings, ruins from the Zapotec, you can look at these same exact designs you'll find on the buildings, you'll find right here in their artwork. So this is a modern day rug, and when you put those side by side, you can actually see that design continues on. So you can imagine that this building was used as inspiration for the art of this rug. How cool is that? Now, what's really awesome is the natural dyes that they use. Remember, we had the maps of different natural colors and where they came from Mexico. So once you get to southern Mexico, you get lots of different bright, vibrant colors. One of my favorite bright natural colors to talk about is coming from this parasite growing on this cactus. So right here, you can take these, you can collect these and dry them out. And when you crush them up, you get a red powder, and you can mix it with water. You get this red dye that fiber artists still use today and that were used traditionally in Mexico as well. All right, so we are just moving right along. And what is this? What are those dragon things? Right, Joyce? It is amazing. Those are these alihibres. Go look them up. So, so cool. one of my favorite types of art. All right, so we're going to jump right into, we're going to show you a quick example of a cathedral, because religion does play a very big part of the Mexican culture. And remember, this is just one place in Mexico, and they can vary depending on what region that you go to in Mexico. And then we're going to jump right into our Kahoot quiz. All right. So this is the Metropolitan Cathedral located in central Mexico City. And when we go around and we look at the Metropolitan Cathedral, a couple of interesting things to think about. When I was visiting, the Pope was about to visit. So that's why they have these big posters and pictures of the Pope up. So when you walk inside these big giant cathedrals, there are lots of different places where you can light candles, you can pray. They have these big elaborate altars that have portraits of saints and gold work all throughout the cathedral. It's really hard to get on a camera just the size and the scope of this cathedral. So as we pan around, just keep in mind, look how big this is. We can't even get all the way up to the ceiling. So this is an organ. Look at all these pipes going up here. So this big organ, this is a musical instrument. If you've never heard or seen one of these, similar to, it's a keyed instrument, kind of like a piano would be played, but it's different. It's not the same instrument. And all of these big pipes. So when this thing is played, music just echoes all throughout this giant cathedral and can be heard from anywhere around. So what's interesting is when you come to one of these big cathedrals, they have these side rooms, and some of them are dedicated to specific saints or to, say, the Mother Mary, and lots of people go directly into those side rooms to pray, or out in the major or main cathedral. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this is the newer part of the cathedral. There's an older part of the cathedral, and the reason they had, it's a very specific reason they had to build a new part, and which I'll show you in just a second. But look how big these paintings, each one of these paintings, to give you an idea and scale, I mean, they were giant, maybe 5-6 feet high, size of a person. So those aren't just small paintings that are up way high on this altar. So we're going to turn up the volume. You can hear how echoey it is throughout the cathedral, and then hear the music players out in the main parts of the square as well. All right, so we're going to jump right into our Kahoot game. For those of you that will start wrapping it up and need to head out, and then if you have time to stick around, we'll give you a little bonus tour of the Aztec Great Temple located behind the Metropolitan Cathedral. Really cool stuff to talk about, maybe more interesting to our older audiences. So you can choose your own path from here. All right, so Kahoot, make sure you're logged in, Explorers, and get those questions sent in if you want me to answer your live question. All right, so let's do it. What food was domesticated in southern Mexico? Is it apples, wheat, corn, or oranges? All righty, it was corn. Good job. And Polite Shark jumping out to the lead. Next question. Which indigenous people lived in Mexico City before the Spanish arrived? So which people lived in Tenochtitlan? Was it the Maya, the Aztec, the Olmec, or the Zapotec? Do you remember? All right, was the Aztec, okay? And the Aztecs still live there. They are still around, just like all native peoples, no matter where you're watching from today. Find out who lived in your home before you did. That's a great activity to take on the rest of the day if you don't know. Polite Shark, all right, great job. Next question. What is the most popular sport in Mexico? Football or soccer? All right, we still have our leader, Polite Shark, And 2 more questions, make them count. What is the most practiced religion in Mexico? All right, this is Catholicism, the Catholic version of Christianity. All right, so we have a new leader, Elated Dolphin. Last question, who's going to win? Traditionally, where is the most colorful Mexican art from? Is it the northern region, the central region, or the southern region? All right, it is the southern region, and today's winner is dun, 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 dun. All right, Elated Dolphin. Congratulations, Elated Dolphin. You're going to win a postcard from me. Studio. If you choose, if you want your postcard, make sure it's okay with your parents. But there is a Kahoot winner tab in our menu. Go ahead and put your address there so I can send out that postcard, and make sure you get those okayed by your parents, students. All right, so if you have to head out, have a wonderful day. Try to do as much virtual exploring as you can. Don't worry, this shall pass, and we'll be able to get out and stretch our legs in old fashioned, hopefully before we know it. And so if you have to go, have a great, wonderful day. If you have time to stick around, let's check out Tenochtitlan, the great temple of the Aztec, which I definitely want to show you the great temple of the Aztec. So what's interesting is this is a computer rendition of the central parts of the Mexican, or sorry, the Aztec capital city, Tenochtitlan. And so this was their religious center where they had their temples and all their biggest buildings. And today, where we saw that uh, that um, cathedral, that cathedral is built right on top of this. So modern day Mexico City was built right on top of this. So when we talk about the peoples of Mesoamerica, unfortunately, the Spanish was not so nice to them, either intentionally or unintentionally. So they brought lots of diseases with them. Within 100 years, 90% of all Mesoamericans had died, mostly because of disease, but also because of war as well. And any type of religious monument, the Spanish were a Catholic nation, and they came in and wanted to wipe out all local religions, and they tore everything down and built on top of it. So modern day Mexico City is built right on the top of all of these temples. So how do we know that they're there if they're all covered up? Well, it's because some of those are uncovered today, specifically that Tenochtitlan. So when we go into Mexico City, where is it located? Well, it's right back here behind the cathedral. So that cathedral that we were looking at earlier is just back there. And this is the Great Temple of Tenochtitlan. And we're going to walk in here. And if you're wondering, well, where it's not that great, it's not, why is it not high? Well, it's because this pyramid was torn down and built on top of it. And so just a few decades ago, when some work was being done in the city, this site was rediscovered, and it's become an archaeological site now. So everything's been uncovered, but each of these, you see here, each of these layers, these are different layers to the temple. So it started off as a small pyramid, and as the Aztec became more powerful and powerful, they built it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's what these different layers to the pyramid are. And that will make more sense when we walk through it here in just a second. But on the left is what would have been there in the 1500s when the Spanish arrived. To the right is what we find today. That lake has been drained and built on top of it. This is also why, because this is an ancient lake bed, and Mexico City is heavily populated. When there's an earthquake, there's usually lots of damage. That's because that lake bed is not very solid. It's kind of like Jello. You ever seen Jello in a bowl when you shake it back and forth? It shakes a lot, right? That's what the ground does. And that is not very good for any building built on top of that kind of ground. And so it's very similar to some areas of San Francisco that got hit real hard in some of their past quakes. When you build on this type of land that's not very compact and solid, it can shake like Jello and make buildings really fall down. So this is from a past earthquake in Mexico City. And again, this is what it was like when the Aztec were here. in Tenochtitlan. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what is left of the Great Temple today. So what is left is right behind the Metropolitan Cathedral, as what we were just talking about. Also, interestingly enough, remember I said the main Metropolitan Cathedral? Remember I said there was an older cathedral? Well, that's right next door. So you see this little area here? So this is a smaller, older cathedral. I'll take you in there and show you what that's like. Because that is built on top of buildings as well. And because of that, it's actually falling or sinking into the ground. That's why they had to build the new one on a new site there. So let's go ahead and look at the Metropolitan Cathedral. And this is the old cathedral versus the new cathedral that we just looked at a second ago. So my very bad Photoshop skills shows you where the Great Temple was located if it were built to its past glory and the actual height of it. So when we look at how big it is, the Great Temple was 148 feet high, and the Metropolitan Cathedral is 197 feet tall at its towers. So here's a diagram showing you what it's built on top of. So the cathedral is actually built on these old pyramids, and when you walk around the cathedral, you can see evidence of that. And we are heading back here today. So we're going to walk around and we're going to look at the old cathedral, and then we're going to walk into the archaeological dig site. So here first is the old cathedral. And what's interesting here is I want to look at the foundation. So take your eyes and follow along this foundation, explorers. And if it helps you out any, I'll put a couple of lines here on the foundation, and follow those lines across the bottom of this foundation with your eyes. And what's happening to that foundation, right? That foundation is actually sinking. It's falling into the ground. And so the reason is, like I said, it's built on top of rubble. It's built on top of old buildings that the Aztec built. And there's more evidence of this. And this evidence is inside of the cathedral. Again, I'm going to draw another line and to help your eye out, right in the middle. So I want you to follow along that middle line here. And I want you to follow as we pan up, or as we tilt up, we're going to go and see what's happening to the chandelier. So everyone take a look at the chandelier and see, do you notice anything weird about that chandelier? Anything weird about that chandelier? Let me know in the chat box if you think anything's weird about that chandelier. Well, if you are thinking to yourself, I was looking at that line straight down the middle of the aisle, and I followed right up the middle, and the altar is in line. Why is that chandelier off center? Well, the reason is that chandelier is hanging, right? And it's tilted. All right. So Michael's saying it's tilted, or Ava. I'm sorry, Ava. And Eva, sorry. And so the chandelier is actually swinging. So imagine taking a string, all right? And if you tilt the boat or anything like that, the string is always going to hang straight down. Same thing here. So it's actually not the chandelier that's tilted. What's actually tilted is the building. So the building is what's tilted. That chandelier is hanging straight down. So that is something neat to think about. So as we tilt all the way up, or pan all the way up, you'll look all the way at the tip top where that chandelier is actually anchored into the top of the building, or hung, I should say. As we walk behind here, we're going to go see the Great Temple. And again, the Great Temple was 45 feet high, 2 main staircases on the front of it, and it became bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So here's a rendition of the different layers. So we're going to see these different layers when we walk down here. And a couple things you can see is these layers here. So this would have been the front of the temple. So this would have been the last version of the temple that went up 45 feet high of that pyramid. The earlier versions, we're going to see a top of an earlier version. So this is actually the top of the very first, or one of the first versions that is in here. So we're going to start and walk into the site and walk around some of these different places of the pyramid that I want to show you. So this is at the entrance of the pyramid. First, you can look at those agave plants and other desert plants that you can find here. Tells you a little bit about the climate. We are at a raised elevation, in Mexico City. A lot of people get altitude sickness when they visit here, and a lot of people refer to that as Montezuma's revenge. So Montezuma was the leader of the Aztec when the Spanish came, and then the Spanish were not very nice to the Aztec. So this gives you an idea when we're just looking underground there. This is that old cathedral that we were just inside, where the chandelier was hanging off tilt, or actually hanging straight down, but the building is sinking. So that's what that is there. And as we continue to walk walk around the dig site here, couple things to note about the dig sites is, one is you can see these heads of serpents. So these are serpent heads that were built all around the front of the temple. And this is the actual dye. This was the original red paint that was used to paint this serpent head here at the temple. So some of that red dye is still there, and that came from that cactus like we talked about earlier, for that's used in artwork today. So things that were used 500 years ago, at least, if not thousands of years ago, we can still use today with natural dyes. Really cool. Some things never change. So you can see some different carvings and artwork in front of the temple, the original temple. And here, these were frogs. Now, frogs were very important. So these are frogs out here. Frogs are very important to the Aztec people, because the frogs were a indicator of rain coming. So you could use the behavior of frogs to help tell the weather. So frogs were an animal that they use, and imagine rain is very important, especially to a society further in the past that may not have the abilities that we do today to store and treat water for times of drought. So as we walk through, we're going to walk through these different layers. So as we look left and right, you can see different versions of what would have been the front steps. So here's an older version of a serpent. And so in between these different layers would have been just different rubble. So when I say rubble, there's volcanic rock brought in from around the mountains, around the local region. So here, this is a depiction at the entrance or at the bottom of the steps of every version of this temple. They have found a depiction of one of their gods, and this goes back to some of their mythology. And this was two gods that were in battle with one another, and one had lost. So these are just different body. So these are legs and arms. So imagine a god falling after losing to another god and breaking apart into different sections. So that's what this artwork is depicting. And you can find that in different versions of the Great Temple. They have a museum right behind here. Look out, when we pan, we go straight across. I want you to look at how steep these were and how shallow these steps are. And you maybe ask yourself, well, that would have been very hard to climb. And so when I asked someone this, they said, you're right, it would have been. And the idea here is, when you go up some of these temples in Mesoamerica, you're making someone, well, you would not be allowed up there unless you're a high priest or a royal member. But when you go, you needed to use your hands and knees and kind of do a bowing down motion, like a crawling motion as you're going up. So it's a way of bowing to the god as well as you are going up. This is really neat with modern times, talking about points of reunion. So you find these all around. I think these are so neat. Parents and teachers out there today, you may think these are cool too. So often what you'll find around public areas are these public points of reunion. So it's a great way to say, hey, if you get lost or if we get separated, find the closest point of reunion. And you find signs all around the place. And so this is the point where you would go meet each other. So this is evidence from the old sewer line. And you can see this temple was dug right through, and an old sewer line was put right here. So, so it gives you an idea about the history of this place. And a lot of people forgot that this was even here when this got covered up. So look at that. Isn't that neat? So when we turn left, this to the right is what we're looking at. This is the top of one of the original versions of this temple, of this pyramid. And so as we pan right, you'll see the top of it. So what was done here, when we go around these big I said big events, religious events here. So if you're younger audience that are still with us, you may have to get your parents to help explain some of this stuff to you. But sacrifices, both human and animals, were practiced by some Mesoamerican groups, and a lot of people, uh, it's easy for us today to talk about some of those practices, but the my understanding of it is when you have a God and you're thinking about if you want to offer something to your God, right? What is the most valuable thing you could offer to a God? And to many of these people, human blood, it was valuable. And it was the most valuable thing they could offer to a God. Now, it doesn't make it right necessarily in especially today's world, but that's where the thought process is coming from. We're talking about a time before our modern scientific understanding. We have so much more knowledge today and so much more evidence of why a volcano is erupting or why a natural disaster is happening. And we have more understanding of why instead of our gods are mad, let's try to appease our gods. And so that may or may not have been a case into various different forms of celebration. So as you go today, there's still Aztec people today, and they still come here. This is a very important location for them. And so the Great Temple is just behind here. So that site is just behind this wall. So these people were actually coming. This is right behind the cathedral inside Mexico City that we're coming to have ritual rites near the temple. All right. So other artifacts that have been found around the temple have been different pieces of art. Typically, every time they built a new version of the pyramid, they would bury new things. If there were remains of animals like an eagle, or you find other things like musical instruments like horns. These are instruments that are still used today. Here's a more modern version of the guerrero. We have drums that were found. A lot of people ask about the animals in this part of the world. So the jaguar is the apex predator, not as big of a range today as it once was, but they were seen as a powerful animal. A lot of royalty to Mesoamericans would usually pick an animal as an animal for them, and a lot of royalty would pick the jaguar, the eagle, very powerful animal as well. All right, so that's going to wrap up our virtual tour of Tenochtitlan and the Aztec in Mexico City today. We'll do a few of your questions and then we're going to sign off. And if you like what we're doing, check us out tomorrow or the rest of the week, and we will have other programs coming at you soon. All right, so is it all center? All right, got that one. Where's the Kahoot Winners tab? That is located at geoshow.tv. In the main menu should be a Kahoot Winners tab. I'll go check if it's not there and add it. All right, we'll see you next time. Until next time, keep exploring. Bye, everyone.